Hi there, and welcome back to part 5 of my Stellaris Let's Play, Advanced Strategy, Tips and Tricks. In this episode, I'm going to look at migration rights, neighbour relations and how to use your envoys, identifying choke points around your empire, faction management, and monitoring empire sprawl. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Let's dive in. Alright then, here we are, back again. So we have our capital world, which is coming along fine. We've got some research labs, 4 of those built so far. We have our first colony, which we've built our first district on. And we have our second colony, which is almost finished. Meanwhile, our third colony ship is moving to our third colony, and that will be done soon. Now, on this first colony, I've got 1,400 minerals saved up at the moment. I could build lots of extra districts. I could build many extra generated districts because I plan on having lots of districts on this planet, or at least enough to support the population. Now the reason I'm not doing that is because each district that I build, whilst it does provide jobs and housing, there is no point in building a district if there is no one to work those jobs or anyone to use the housing that it provides. It does have an upkeep cost, and on top of that, it will also be increasing my empire sprawl. So you really shouldn't build extra districts unnecessarily. As long as you have 1 or 2 free jobs, you don't need to build a district. So I'm going to press play here. I'm going to bring the speed up to fast, and we'll get going. So this colony ship here, I'm going to build a star base on Jaltham, and then I'm also going to upgrade this starport to the next level once I have enough minerals to do so. And then when I've done that, I'm also going to build a collection building on there so I can pick up this 11 trade value between Jaltham and Heneri. The reason I'm building the starbase at Heneri is that it will provide good border defense against this Western Empire here, because you always want to be looking for where the choke points or the systems that provide the only access into your empire. So at the moment, Heneri is one of them, my capital is actually one of them, and then over here I actually have Gamesia and Azalea where you could enter from either. So I want to be building a starbase up Jondus, Wildemore and Congath, just so I can start fortifying my position a little bit. So here I'm actually going to take the increased survey speed, that's going to be useful. And we've established our colony here. So I'm going to build a mining district just so that when my first population is grown, I will have jobs for them to work in. Now, as you can see, I've got 1.5 immigration here on my second colony. I have 1.5 immigration on my first colony. That means I'm losing 3, or in this case 3.1 population growth from my capital. That is really reducing down my population growth. Basically, I'm not growing. Plus 0.016 means that my capital isn't growing. I'm actually okay with that at this point. I have my 4 research buildings. I just want to increase the size of my colonies. On the other hand, if I didn't want that to happen, I could go to my species and I could set the rights for some of my species. I could enable migration control. I could enable them on my primary species, this subspecies, and I could also set the default rights for any new aliens that were to come to my empire. If all of the species I have in my empire have no right to migration, and I have no migration pacts with external empires, that will mean that I won't be losing any population growth from my capital. So if I really needed the population growth on my capital, I could change those policies around, or those species rights around, and sort that out. In this case, I'm not going to do that because I want my colonies, as I said, to grow. And I'm going to increase the size of my primary fleet here by 1 ship, because I need to have a good fleet size that's more than this 108 cultist marauders. I want to remove those so I can start exploring down this vein, because the neighbouring empire here is going to at some point begin exploring to the south of them, and they'll begin picking up these systems. If they get down to this system here before I do, I'll be kind of stuck. I won't be able to continue moving along here, which is what I want to do. I don't want to get boxed in. I'm again going to make sure that my economy is nice and balanced. I'm going to make sure I'm getting positive across the board. And I'll just increase the amount of minerals I'm selling, because I've got a good stockpile. I don't need a massive mineral increase at the moment. So at this point, looking at the technologies available to me, I've actually got no cheap technologies that would be better than planetary unification. So I'm going to take this technology because it's the cheapest for me to research. Because each technology you have increases your technology diplomatic weight. Speaking of diplomacy, I've got a neighbour. Now, at the moment they have an overwhelming fleet power compared to me. Now, that does seem like it's an issue, but I can see from their diplomatic weight that they really only have about 7 or 8 ships more than me. That's not so big a deal. But I really don't want them to get annoyed with me. I don't want them to go to war with me. So I'm going to use my single envoy and send my envoy over to them to improve relations. That's simply because otherwise I would be wasting the envoy. I have no other use for it. I don't want my neighbours to become aggressive towards me. So that's going to increase the relationship over time. In this case, I don't think it's such a big deal. They are fanatic xenophiles, so they really do like me. The difference in spiritualism and materialism will be balanced out by the xenophilia, which is why we have neutral relations at the moment. If I had another empire near me, which had some slightly different ethics, I would be looking into making sure that they were happy with me, possibly by giving them some resources as well as sending the envoy, because you really don't want an alien species to go to war with you on their terms. You want to be going to war with them on your own terms when you decide it's a good time. Now, with my engineering research, I finally have powered exoskeletons. That's a fantastic technology. That is a prerequisite to getting the robotics technology. So I'm going to take that technology in order to get to robots. Because as I've said before, robots increase your population growth overall because you're getting an extra +2 per turn. There's really no downside to getting that technology. And in this playthrough, I'll probably be going down the synthetic ascension path as I'm a fanatic materialist species. I'm going to start building this starbase at Haneri so that I can pick up on the extra trade value that I'm getting in these two systems. And at this point, I'm going to take the starbase upkeep because I'll have 3 starbases. I'll reduce the cost of maintaining those by 20%. That's nice. The administrative sprawl bonus really wouldn't change very much. I'd go from 40 to somewhere around 43, 44. That would be, in terms of technology, a change from 8% down to something like 5%. At this point as well, I'm going to build a 3rd science ship, because at the moment I've got 1 science ship off surveying up here, and I've got another one surveying up this route, but I've got nothing moving down south. So I'm going to first off okay, so now I've had some factions have formed. That's really good. That's going to help increase my influence generation. So let's go and look at the faction screen to deal with these new factions. So at the beginning of the game, the factions you're going to get will almost always be the factions that relate directly to the ethics you've chosen. As the game goes on, the factions that are present in your empire will start to diverge from those ethics, and in the late game you might have a faction for every ethic. Now, factions have some level of approval, which is based on you fulfilling their issues or wishes. And based on their level of approval and the total support they have in your population, you get a passive influence generation from them. So at the moment I'm getting 0.57 from my Strength Through Unity initiative, which is the authoritarian faction, and I'm getting 0.96 from my Institute for Technologists, which is the materialist faction. And as you can see, those are kind of balanced in the 1/3 to 2/3 ratio. And that's because my population is fanatic materialist, so 2/3 materialism, and basic authoritarian, so 1/3 authoritarian. With their issues, you can hover over them to see what kind of bonus or modifier, negative or beneficial, you're getting from fulfilling or not fulfilling that issue. So in this case, I'm allowing AI, and no one is higher in technology than me. So I'm getting plus 20% happiness to my technologists. This base happiness, this happiness will also give a bonus to my population that follow or are a member of that faction. So if I go to my capital, I can see that my happiness is now 70%. It's quite high. And the same is true across my colonies. I've got quite a nice high happiness amongst members who are part of those factions. So if you want to do a bit more with your factions, you can manage the faction. Now in this window, this allows you to do one of three things, two of which are ongoing and one is an instant change. So the two ongoing are that you can promote a faction or suppress a faction. Both of these will cost influence, and they will either increase the attraction to that specific ethos or decrease it. This can be useful because in order to change the ethics of your empire, you have to have sufficient populations following the factions that you want to move to, the factions whose ethos or ethic you want to move towards. Now, as you can see here, to embrace a faction, I need 500 influence, so I'd have to save that up, and I'd also need to make sure that support for that faction was at least 20%. And if I were to do that, I could change my ethics. And in the late game, you might want to do that. Most playthroughs, you would usually build a faction that you have a plan for, a species or a civilization that you have a plan for, and you wouldn't really want to change your ethics of your overall civilization. There might be some builds that you can think of where that might be useful, but mostly that isn't the case. On the other hand, if you're trying to do more of a roleplay playthrough, factions and changing of factions can be quite interesting and quite useful. Also, if you hover over the top here, you can see the exact percentage of your population following each ethic and what bonuses or negative modifiers may be causing people to want to join or want to leave those factions. For instance, we have authoritarian, it's our governing ethic, and also we have a faction that exists. So here I'm going to build our third science ship. I'm going to send off the fleet to attack the cultist marauders here on Minnock. Something else to note is that I've discovered an exotic resource here in the Pidosphere system. Now, I can't use this resource yet because I don't have the technology. In order to get the technology, and in order to make it easier to get the technology, I should add this system to my borders. Because to get the exotic gas refining technology, I get an increased chance of it coming up if I have a system which is producing exotic gases inside of my borders. That will give a positive modifier to the chance of it coming up. Now, coming here to technology, I'm actually going to choose the combat computers because that will give us the best change to our spaceships.
Initializing hostile engagement protocols.
And again, I'm going to decline the research agreement with the civilization next to me. And here we are fighting. I should have a good chance of winning this combat. Although I have lost a starship, that's unfortunate. I really didn't want to lose one, as it's a wasted 100 alloys. going to return them to my starbase to reduce my upkeep again and recruit a new scientist to send off. And I'm definitely going to take a scientist with brain slugs, because brain slugs are fantastic. Now, if you're starting to get cluttered icons on the top, it's always best to remember that you can just right-click them to make them go away. Looking here again at our fleet combat stats, we can see they were very ineffective against our shields, very effective against our armor, and that's because they only had lasers. We, on the other hand, never had an average damage below 100%. As you can see here, our missiles came in at 100% efficiency and our mass drivers at 50% efficiency. But due to the fact that our missiles were bypassing shields, we ended up having a good combination of the two weapons. And now I'm going to set this ship to auto-explore. And I'm going to build another district here, as I'm running out of districts. Now with our Empire Sprawl, we're up to 61 Empire Sprawl out of a possible admin cap of 40. That's still not a big deal. That's changing our technology cost by 8% and our tradition cost by 12.4%. That's equivalent to having less than one researcher extra. That's reducing the effectiveness of our researchers by around 8%. And given that we've only got 8 researchers, that's about half a researcher's worth of effectiveness.
Receiving transmission.
Now I'm also going to take the hydroponics farming technology, not because it's a good technology, but because it's the cheapest. So, our neighbouring empire have offered us a commercial pact. But we don't know, if we were to accept that, what it would mean in terms of benefit to our economy. So we can go in and look at what offering a commercial pact to them would look like. That allows us to see that we would get 1.9 energy, and they would get 0.77 energy and 0.38 unity, which doesn't seem like it would be worth the 0.25 influence, so I'm going to decline that.
Receiving transmission. Research concluded.
And now we've got the robotic technology. I'm definitely going to take that one. And that is where I'm going to leave part 5 of the video. I hope you've enjoyed it. As ever, I hope you found something interesting and useful that you can take and use in your own games. If you have enjoyed it, please leave a like and comment if you have any feedback, any opinions, anything you'd like to see in future episodes. If you'd like to see more content like this, please subscribe.